If you've been here on Wednesday nights, as Steve introduced these letters to the 7 churches, he makes it real clear as he leads you kind of through an overview of them that there's only 2 that get a positive review from God, 2 out of 7. 5 have some real problems. And one of the things that is very interesting about that is, among others, that apparently there are 2 of the smaller churches that are doing well. And we don't know a whole lot about these churches other than, what we read in the actual letter to the church. Smyrna and Philadelphia are the 2 churches that, in essence, I guess you would call it, Jesus gives a passing grade to. And a lot of the bigger, more influential churches, he finds basically what amounts to a fatal flaw in those churches. And what that says to me is, as Americans, I think we're a whole lot more interested in big than Jesus is. Jesus is far more interested in faithful than he is in big. We have a tendency, don't we, to equate success with big. The bigger you are, the more successful you are. And in the Lord's eyes, that's just not the case. And I think that's certainly illustrated here in these letters to these 7 churches. And by the way, why 7? Well, 7's a complete number. And he could have written to 10 churches, just as easy in Asia, as 7 or 5. He just arbitrarily chooses these 7. And I believe it's because, as has been pointed out, he's writing to these churches, but he's writing for us. There are issues and principles in every letter that were applicable then and remain applicable now. But I just want you to keep in mind that as we think in terms of what God sees as successful, it's not necessarily what Western culture and Americans see as successful. Now, Smyrna, we don't know, again, a whole lot about the church there. The city, Smyrna was a planned town. The idea of building planned suburbs and planned towns is nothing new. The Greeks were doing this over 2,000 years ago. And so Smyrna was a planned town placed at a very strategic location where trade routes intersected. Apparently a beautiful city, well laid out. Today, there's still a town there. It's now called Izmir. It's no longer called Smyrna. Smyrna's title, its name, comes from a word that we've all heard before. Remember how they take Jesus' body and they wrap it in what? Myrrh and aloes, okay? Smyrna comes from that word myrrh, all right? It's interesting. Lubbock, where we lived for 12 years, was built as a planned city. And so it was laid out true to the compass. And when we first moved there back in 70, man, it was easy to get around in because it was laid out straight north and south and straight east and west. Okay? And the north-south streets, the vast majority of them were alphabetical, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And the ones that ran east and west, were 4th Street, 32nd Street, 53rd, so on, like that. It was easy to find your way around. Now, they've messed it up big time since then. They built all these neighborhoods, and you get it wound up and twisted up as anywhere. A lot of towns just grew up. Portales, where we lived for 16 years, it was built along the railroad tracks. Okay, and the railroad tracks run through at an angle through Portales, and so it was built at an angle. And then some genius some years ago decided he was going to straighten it all out and going to run the street straight with the compass instead of angled. And what you ended up with, I had a young man who come to work with me there, and he wanted to go visit a young person in the congregation, and I said, well, let me take you over there. Oh, no, I can find it. Okay. I thought, might as well learn now. And so he came back in about 20 minutes, and he said, that doesn't exist. That address does not exist. I said, I told you I'd take you there. I mean, it's one of the few places where you could go from 2nd Street to 12th Street in a block. I mean, it was just insane as it intersected, and it was just a mess. Now, Smyrna is a model town, okay? And it has apparently lots of temples in it, lots of businesses in it. There was a big hill that sit back behind it that had temples on top of it, kind of like the Acra Corinth in the city of Corinth. And so this was apparently kind of a show place. Now, how the church got started there, don't know. Obviously, I think somebody came out from the mother church of Ephesus and preached the gospel there, and a congregation was established. But who did that and how that went about, we don't know. In fact, the letter's pretty short, you know. It's chapter 2, verses 8 through 11 is all the letter amounts to. But he does say, I believe, some very profoundly important things in this letter. And so let's look at it now. To the angel of the church in Smyrna, right now, again, man, I love this. The idea that we've got an angel. Now, again, I don't know how that works, but I just think that's the coolest thing, that there's an angel of the church at Fort Gibson. There's an angel for every one of God's churches. And why would he say that if he didn't mean it? You know, I think there is. What do they do? I don't know. But I just think it's cool that one day we may get to meet the angel of the church at Fort Gibson. And so this is directed to the angel of the church in Smyrna, who, by the way, is obviously going to be very interested in what happens, isn't he? These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. Now, each letter will begin with a self-description. This is a self-description of Jesus. And what's he telling this church who is about to suffer tremendous, difficult persecution? He's saying, I control time and I control death, and I want you to know that. That's really important, isn't it? It is difficult for us to conceive of something outside of time. I can't. Because we're time bound. We exist in time. All we know is time. We know beginning and end and middle, and we know hours and days and weeks and months and years and all that. But to move outside of that realm into an existence of no time, because time's irrelevant, because it's eternity, is something beyond my comprehension. Because I'm a finite being, and so are you, and we're talking about something that's infinite. What Jesus is beginning here and telling him right off the bat is, hey, at the beginning, I was there. In the end, I'm going to be there. Remember, in the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was with God. The Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. And apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. That's the introduction to the Gospel of John. When what we know as the beginning began, he was already there. He began the beginning. Now wrap your head around that one if you can. But what he's saying is, when it all comes to an end, at the last, when it's all over, when everything's burned up with fire, according to 2 Peter 3, I'm going to be there. I am the first and the last. Now, that's important because, let's be honest. Are you a little uncertain about the future? Well, how are things going to go over the next 10 years? And I don't have any more a clue than anybody else does in regard to how that's going to go. Back at the first of the year, as an experiment, I don't know if I told you this or not, I looked up a few economic gurus on the internet. Guys are supposed to know what they're talking about. And I thought, okay, there's like 4 of them, and I'm just going to see what these guys say about how the economy is going to go. In May, here we are, fixing to be in June. 5 months later, you know something? Every one of them couldn't have been more wrong. I'm not kidding you. They couldn't have been more wrong. Oh, the economy's going to go this way, and tech stocks are going to go through the roof, and blah, blah, blah. And all that that is not what happened at all. These guys are experts, right? They don't know the end, man. They don't even know the middle. I'll guarantee you. And we're all that way, aren't we? Because we're finite. We don't know. But we find ourselves, how many times did the Israelites go, how's God going to get us out of this one? How's he going to fix this? Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And God wasn't worried about it, was he? God knew exactly what he was going to do. He knew exactly how he was going to deliver them. Wasn't a big deal. Except to the Israelites in the middle of it who couldn't see the end. What Jesus is saying is really important, brothers and sisters. He's saying, I've got this. I know how it's going to turn out. Read chapters 21 and 22. You're going to win. It's going to be okay. In the end, you're going to come out on top. You're going to find yourself living in paradise, eating from the tree of life. It's going to be fine. Now, in the meantime, he's not pulling any punches. It's going to be rough, folks. Some of you are fixing to go to prison. It's going to be a tough time. But you're going to win. How do I know? Because I'm the first and the last. I see how it's going to turn out. I know how it's going to be. That's incredibly important. Because you see, we stay upset all the time because we don't know that. But he does. Now, he says, I'm the first and the last. And he also says, and this is literally what he says is, he became dead and came to life again. Describing himself. Isn't that interesting terminology? Who became dead. Now to me that's different than died. There's an implication there that he chose to die. He became dead. If there was ever a person who lived who didn't deserve to die, who was it? It was Jesus Christ, because he was perfect. And yet he chose to die on the cross. He chose to become dead. But he became dead and what? Came to life again. You don't have to fear death. I've got it under control. No matter how bad things get, don't worry about it. And he's going to reiterate this later on in the letter, at the end of the letter, as an encouragement. But I think it's important to note that he begins by saying, listen, please understand, in the midst of all that's going on and the uncertainty that you're facing, hey, I started this, I'll finish it, I know how it's going to turn out. Death did not conquer me, I conquered it. I became dead and I lived again. And as Paul will say again and again in his letters, what? If he did it, then he can do it for us. So we don't need to fear death. Now, in verse 9, basically what he's going to say is, I know what's going on. I know your situation. I know your afflictions and your poverty. Yet you're rich. I know the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Now there's four things here that Jesus says he knows. But before we look at those, I just think it's important to hear him say something here, which is, I'm paying attention to what's going on with you. There's a view of God that philosophically has held sway among a certain number of people for a long, long time. Goes back, I think Thomas Jefferson was a deist. A deist is a person who says, yeah, God exists, God started things, but then he just kind of walked away and he doesn't pay any attention. And things just go as they go, okay? And so there is a God, but God really doesn't pay attention to what happens on this earth. This absolutely slam dunks that and says that is flat not true. That's an assertion that doesn't hold water. I know your affliction. I know your poverty. I am very aware of the difficulties you face. He's paying attention. I don't think it's accidental that Luke tells you when Stephen's dying, when they're stoning him to death, what's he doing? He's looking up and he's seeing Jesus standing at the right hand of God. That's not accidentally told. What that's saying is Jesus is paying attention to what happens to his children. He knows what's going on. It's not like he's lost interest and he's walking away, that he doesn't care. That is not it at all. Well, Lord, why are you letting this kind of stuff happen? Well, one day he'll explain it. But in the meantime, don't think he doesn't know what's going on. Don't think he's not paying attention. I know what you're facing. And not only does he know, but I'm going to argue, not only he just doesn't know it, he empathizes with us. He identifies with us. As he's going to point out, he's been through a lot of what we're going through. And I think that's really important. I know, he says, your afflictions. Now, the Greek word here is thlipsis, which literally means pressure. Pressure. Now, what's it like to be under pressure? We all know what that's like. Maybe you're under pressure at school. Man, I gotta pass this test. I'm going to pass this course. I'm under pressure. Maybe it's getting a contract in a business deal. If I don't get this contract, the business may go under. If I don't make this sale, I'm not going to make my quota for the month. I mean, we face pressure all the time, don't we? And he says, I know that you're under pressure. Now, how were they under pressure? Well, he's going to mention a little bit. Obviously, there was a cadre of Jews in Smyrna making their lives miserable. Now, what role the Roman government at this point was playing, not really sure. But imagine the pressure of, well, you know, if you don't drop a pinch of incense and say Caesar is Lord, you're going to lose your job, lose your living, get kicked out of the union. I mean, you talk about pressure. How am I going to feed my family if they won't let me work? There's all kinds of pressure being brought on these folks. And Jesus says, I understand that pressure. Now, I want you to think about something. Last week of his life, at least before he's crucified, okay, he's in Jerusalem. How would you like to go to the temple every day, and you know when you get there, there's going to be this group of very highly educated, very powerful people who absolutely hate your guts. I mean, they despise you. And every time they look at you, it is with hate-filled eyes. And every time they speak of you, it's with a sneer. And everything you say, they're parsing. And they're trying to come up with questions that'll trip you up. They're trying to get you to say something that'll get you in trouble or present a contradiction of some kind. I mean, how would you like to live with that every day? That's what Jesus lived with. He says, I know what pressure is. I know what it is to face constant criticism, to have all these people standing there, and I know they're going to kill me because he knows what's going to happen to him. I know they want me dead. I know they want to destroy me. In a little bit, he's going to talk about how they slander him. And so he's telling these brethren, yeah, you know, whatever you're facing, believe me, I know, I can identify with it. I've been there too. I know the pressure. I know your poverty. Some translations say something like dire need. Matthew 5, verse 3, in those Beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, same word. Dirt poor is the idea. There's different Greek words for poor, and this is the word for you ain't got anything. Okay? You don't have just a little bit, you've got nothing. You are dirt poor. And so here in the midst of a model city, right, with beautiful temples and beautiful buildings and thriving economy, these people are hungry. Now, why are they hungry? I believe they're hungry because they're faithful. They're facing persecution. Maybe they're finding it difficult to sell their goods or do business with other people, kicked out of unions, that kind of thing. And they understand not only pressure, but they understand poverty as well. Now again, does Jesus understand poverty? What's his bank account look like? You know, when he walks around, he basically has to do a miracle to come up with temple tax, doesn't he? I mean, he has the clothes on his back, and that's it. The birds of the air have their nests, the foxes have their holes, but what about the Son of Man? Nowhere to lay his head. He knows poverty. He lives and does his ministry with basically nothing in the way of physical goods at all. He knows dire poverty. But I know that you're rich. What? How can you be dirt poor and be rich? Well, it all depends on how you define wealth, doesn't it? There are a lot of people that are really rich and they're dirt poor, aren't they? Now, I think it's fascinating that Bezos and the founder of Microsoft, Gates, are both getting divorced. Bezos already divorced, Gates in the process of being divorced. They've got billions and billions and billions of dollars, and their personal lives are a mess. They're a mess. Now, are they rich? Well, how do you define wealth? How do you find what really matters, what really counts? Is what really counts that you got more money than you know what to do with? Is that really rich? Or is it like a dear brother I know who never had anything, dairy farmer, barely got by in life, okay? 8 of the best kids you ever saw. Great, great family. Now that family's become preachers and deacons and professors, and some of the girls married preachers, married elders. I mean, great family. I would tell you that guy's rich. He's rich. Now, he didn't have any of this, but he's wealthy. And that's what I believe Jesus is talking about here. You can be rich in relationships. You can be rich in hope. You can be rich in peace. You can be rich in a lot of things that people with money are dead dog poor in, don't have any of. I was reading about one of the drug lords down in Colombia. And this guy literally would go bury apparently like $1 million. He had a guy, he'd just send him out and he'd dig a hole and bury $1 million wrapped in plastic so he could dig it up later because he had more money than he could spend, literally. And so he was just stuffing money off in holes all over parts of Colombia. And oh, by the way, rarely slept in the same place 2 nights in a row. Didn't trust anybody except a couple of people very, very close to him. Lived in basically a constant state of paranoia and fear. Oh, but he had a lot of money. Yeah, he had a lot of money. He had no life. No life. Jesus says, yeah, the world may consider you dirt poor. Let me tell you something. And what really matters, you're rich. And fourthly, he says, I know the slander that you endure. John 15, verse 18, Jesus had said, if the world hates you, keep in mind what? That it hated me first. I think it's very important to remember the Lord knows who the bad guys are. Sometimes I think we wonder, does he really know who the bad guys are? Because bad guys seem to be winning. I mean, that's what the folks in Revelation are facing. They're like, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be the good guys. How come the bad guys seem to be winning? And the ebb and flow of things, what the Lord says is there are times when that appears to be the way it is. But let me tell you, in the end, that's not how it turns out. Okay, there's an ebb and flow to this thing, but in the end, I'm going to win. I'm going to come out on top. You know, the devil is going to be defeated and kicked into that burning lake of fire, and that's it. I mean, it'll be over at that point. But in the meantime, I know the slander you endure. You've never lied, you've never cheated, you've never hurt anybody, You've never done anything wrong. And what are they saying about you? You're an insurrectionist. You're a terrorist. You have all these political ambitions. You want to tear the kingdom apart. You're a drunkard. You're a glutton. You party with really bad people. I mean, on and on and on. They're bringing all these accusations against him, slandering him. He says, I understand what it means when people lie about you, when they speak evil of you falsely. It happens. It happened to me, he's saying. And it's going to happen to you. One of the things that really struck me and kind of educated me in a way that I didn't want to be educated was as I was doing all this research into the whole woke thing. Man, one of the things that, as I listened to speaker after speaker after speaker slander you, they were slandering you. They're slandering me because they're slandering anybody with Christian convictions. I mean, slandering us, saying vile stuff about us. And Carol will tell you, get mad, get depressed, get angry. And what was being said about us, it's not true, it's not true. But they don't care. Jesus understands what it means to be slandered. Now, verses 10 and 11. Don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. Oops. How would you like, what if Jesus was standing up here and he said, Jerry, don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. Pat, I tell you, the devil's going to put you in prison. Not exactly good news, huh? I mean, is that going to give you pause for thought? Can you imagine when they get this letter? Oh, hey, we got a letter from Jesus to us here at Smyrna. Woo-hoo! What's it say? Well, I tell you, some of you are fixing to go to prison. And you're going to suffer persecution for a while. 10 days. Figurative term meaning an indefinite period of time. Ooh. That hardly sounds like gospel, does it? That hardly sounds like good news. But what's he telling them? I know what's coming your way. I am very aware of it. I've been through it. You're going to have to go through it. Be faithful even to the point of death. I'll give you the crown of life. Hang in there. It will be okay. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes will not be hurt by the second death. He promises two wonderful rewards. Number one, he says, you hang in there, and I will see to it that you have the crown of life. Now again, there's two crowns in Greek. One is a diademos, from which we get the word diadem, and that is the crown of royalty. When Queen Elizabeth appears as queen, she has the diademos on her head. When kings in other countries make an appearance, you don't hear much about kings, but other countries still have kings, they will wear the diademos. That's the crown of royalty. That's not the crown that he's talking about here. The crown that he's talking about here is the Stephanos, from which we get our word Stephanie. The Stephanos is the crown of victory. That's the crown they gave to the winner of the games. That's the crown when you ran the race and you finished first, you got the Stephanos. When you wrestled and you won the wrestling match and you were the best wrestler, you got the Stephanos. Okay, it is the crown. James 1 verse 12, it's the crown of life. 1 Peter 5 verse 4, it's the crown of glory that will never fade away. 2 Timothy 4 verse 8, it is the crown of righteousness. And so it is the Stephanos of life, of glory, of righteousness. He says, that's what I'm promising you. I'm promising you the victor's crown. Now, at this point, I mean, think about it. You're fixing to go to prison. You're fixing to be persecuted. Do you feel like a winner? Or do you feel like a loser? And he's saying, I'm telling you, hang in there. You'll be a winner. Endure. Be faithful. you'll receive the victor's crown. You're not a loser. You're not. You're a winner in this. And secondly, the other beautiful promise, you will not be hurt, he says, by the second death. Now, Hebrews 9:27 says, everybody dies once. 2 exceptions that I know of, right? And that's it, Enoch and Elijah. Outside of that, everybody dies once. You don't have to die twice. And that's the beauty of what we're taught in Revelation chapter 20, verses 6 and 14, where we will not be held by the second death. So I have to die physically. Yes, I do. I've got to pay the price for my sin, but I do not have to die spiritually. Jesus took care of that. And so for us, we do not have to endure the second death. In fact, what's he promise? He promises, I'm going to let you sit by a tree and you can eat the fruit anytime you want to, and that's a tree of life, and you'll live forever. That's what he promises. That's what will be ours. So, from Smyrna, hold on to these 3 truths. The Lord's in control. The Lord knows what's going on. He knows your plight. He's been there. He identifies with it. He cares. And thirdly, the Lord will reward his faithful. Hang in there. Victory awaits. If we can help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?